You say that most, if not all, Protestants believe that the Jesus prayer is simply vain repetition. First of all, most Protestants have never heard of the Jesus prayer, know nothing of its tradition and importance in the Church, in Christianity, its origins, its spiritual impact, its purpose. And so, right there, that is incorrect. As to the Jesus prayer being vain repetition, that would be a further level of ignorance, because the whole essence of it is making contact, is consciousness of God, remembrance of God and remembrance of self, remembering our need and calling upon God. So if calling upon God frequently or all the time is a vain repetition, then we have a problem at the very heart of religion as relinking with God. The Jesus prayer is one of the most powerful spiritual elements in the history of Christianity. There are numerous wonderful books on it, including one that I translated from the French. And if one were to look at them, it would be evident immediately that it is an act of attention, an act of consciousness, an act of the heart. The great teachers warn people not to use it without warming the heart, without bringing the mind into the heart, which is another profound spiritual teaching. So it is a transformational pathway into the presence of God. You ask, where in the Bible would one find reference to it? I would point you to those many personages in the teachings, like Bartimaeus, the blind man. What does he say to Jesus? Lord Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. How often do we see those calling upon Jesus with those very words? And then we have Paul, the apostle, calling us to pray ceaselessly. This does not mean babbling, but it means being in that state of presence and emotional awareness that remains connected to the reality of God and to our need and dependence on that reality. This has nothing to do with the idea of vain repetitions. When Jesus says, do not make long prayers, do not babble like the pagans, he is referring to the superficial, empty ritualism of the times, or of people who use such long prayers without engaging their heart, mind, soul into the whole purpose of prayer. Go into the secret room, he says. That secret room, of course, is your inner being, and it is out of the inner being that the Jesus prayer comes. There are phases of this experience that the great ones, the holy ones, the lovers of God in the past have told us about, which ultimately lead to being able to live the prayer without even saying it. It is constantly there, this consciousness of God, this remembrance, this standing in the presence of. This is where it is leading. So you would want to be very careful not to belittle something so sacred, so spiritually powerful, and so profound for countless Christians, countless lovers of God, who in all situations, including the worst imaginable, found connection, made connection with Spirit through the sacred prayer. This idea of vain repetition is the idea that we humans constantly default to automatic behavior, to thoughtless functioning, to doing things that are mechanical and have no rootedness in spiritual presence, spiritual emotion that stirs our whole being. This occurs everywhere, even with versions of Christianity that have no ritual. Just the doing again and again without thought or attention, attention being the key factor here, leads us into a robotic functioning that has nothing to do with the spiritual experience. And this is found everywhere. Our very lives are examples of this. How we take everything for granted, how we, without presence and attention, live our lives all the time. Some call it a state of sleep, being hypnotized by outer circumstances. In fact, the essence of Christ's teachings is vigilance. Be aware, watch, do not sleep, calling us into that very presence out of which the Jesus prayer comes, calling us out of that walking sleep or walking death in which we journey through life. This is a task recognized in numerous teachings because it is so fundamental. We have to go against the grain of our habits of falling into this behavior without meaning, this lack of participation with our whole being in all aspects of our existence. It is to this dynamic attention that we are called, and one of the things that can hold us there is precisely this Jesus prayer.